Hello, I'm Graham Pritchard and welcome to my channel Study History with Mr. P. This GCSE history topic summary video focuses on the USA conflict and home and abroad topic of civil rights, only looking at the Brown versus Board of Education Topeka case. So in the early 1950s, many southern states had made segregated schools more equal in the hope of avoiding calls for desegregation. In fact, the governor of South Carolina, James Burns, had gone as far as to say he would rather close state schools than desegregate, and proceeded to spend over $100 million upgrading black schools. Linda Brown was one of many black children in Topeka, Kansas, who had to pass their local white school to travel to their nearest black school. And in 1951, the Browns and 12 other parents went to court to fight for their children's right to go to their nearest school, which was white. But they lost their case because of the earlier Supreme Court ruling, the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling, which said separate but equal was okay. Then in 1952, the NAACP bundled 5 school desegregation cases together and took them to the Supreme Court. The NAACP lawyers argued that separate was not equal in school and therefore schools should desegregate. By December 1952, the Supreme Court judges had not made a ruling. They voted to hear more legal advice, and during this time, one of the judges was replaced, and his replacement, L. Warren, was not pro-segregation and was made Chief Justice. Then, on the 17th of May 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that since the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling, life had changed, that a good education was vital for all to progress, and that segregated schools could make black children feel inferior, and therefore they were unconstitutional. Basically saying that separate but equal had no place in education, and that schools had to desegregate. But the Supreme Court set no timescale for this. Therefore, the following year, in 1954, there was a second Supreme Court ruling, sometimes nicknamed Brown versus Board of Education Topeka 2. And this ruled that segregation should be carried out with all deliberate speed. But again, this was vague, so it still didn't really set a timescale on desegregation. However, in the short term, this led to a number of changes. First of all, the southern border states desegregated school first and did so with little violence. But in the extreme south, the deep south, there was an extreme white backlash, and this included the signing of the Southern Manifesto by 11 states that rejected the Brown decision as illegal and said they would do all that they could possible to avoid desegregation. In the deep south as well, black children in schools that had already been integrated started to face violence, and white citizens' councils were set up to preserve segregation. Membership of the Ku Klux Klan grew, and many black people actually saw themselves in the short term in a worse position. There were, however, a number of long-term effects of the Brown ruling. So in the long term, black students still faced hostility when going to white schools, and many actually lost the good education that they'd previously had in black schools, which were then shut down or integrated. There was also something called the white flight, where white people, especially in towns and cities, moved out of areas that had large black communities. And this, in effect, created a new kind of segregation based on where people lived. Now, but the South did desegregate, but integration was very patchy. And there was still a lot of segregation going on for a number of years. Many black teachers, in fact, lost their jobs when schools integrated, and others that ended up working in integrated schools faced deep racism. There was, though, a sense that the Plessy ruling of separate but equal had been overturned and could not now be used to block desegregation going forward. And people looked to use the Brown ruling to push desegregation in other places. It now meant there was certainly a greater awareness of civil rights, but white hostility for a while led to a decline in membership of civil rights groups because of fears of violence.